Like, this is my 20th year of doing this stuff.
Right.
So from very young in the industry, I watched a lot of people take things and do them on a budget. And what people I think sometimes forget is this is a vehicle that not only yourself is in, but your family's in. And whenever you're running your family up and down the road in something, why are you going to put a budgeted price point on you and your family's life?
Welcome to Tread Talk, the official podcast of Fury Tires, where rubber meets the road and off-road. Coming up, host Jason Hempey is joined by Bradley Spearing from Elevate Suspension to discuss Elevate's history, the company's origins, its evolution, what sets Elevate apart from the competition, and what they have in store for the future. Keep it locked because it's going to be a good one. Here's your host, Jason Hempey.
Welcome to this episode of Tread Talk. I'm here with Brad or Bradley.
Yeah, either
Spearing,
one.
whatever. That was a funny story just on me. So of Elevate Suspension.
Yes, sir.
How's it going, man?
Good, buddy. How are you?
So what was that anecdote you're saying? I said, do you prefer going by Brad or Bradley?
Yeah, so, growing up as a kid, I had a pretty strong Southern accent. Some would say I still have it. But whenever I would say Brad, especially like on the phone or introducing, people would be like, Brian? Brett? What? And I'm like, so I just figured Bradley, if I was like Brad Lee, then they can't really kind of, figure that out.
Right,
so.
right. Well, it sounds like Brad, so yeah. I don't know. I heard that. So tell me a bit about Elevate. Tell me, you were telling me a great story, so tell me the history and where you guys are at now. Tell me a bit about it.
Yeah, so Elevate basically originated from Jason Dvorak, who is the owner of JFab Inc. It was a plan where he had already been doing for a long time a business deal with Rob at Plan B Fab, where Jason would cut and manufacture a lot of the parts for him and R&D and, well, not R&D, but basically like engineer the parts. And then Rob would kind of take them, R&D them, test fit them, build them out, do the final fit and finish for a customer. Like somebody wanted their truck built, Rob would take it and do that whole process for them.
Right.
Jason then at a point wanted to actually scale the business and offer it to where people could get the same style or quality of kit or higher end level of a kit, but for more the everyday guy that could bolt it on, or for shops that actually, they need a set time. They need to be able to knock a kit out in a certain amount of time so they can stay profitable and be efficient and things of that nature. So, Rob's Rob. He felt like one-off stuff was more cool. Bolt-on wasn't cool. And Jason felt like there was a way to make bolt-on cool.
Okay.
So in 2019, he had designed a kit, did some pretty cool stuff, made overlays that, they'd done overlays for years out of like steel and mirrored stainless and stuff like that.
Right.
But at that point, you hadn't really seen anybody do anything out of billet aluminum. So Jason had machined out some billet aluminum pieces, and then take it a step further, had router cut some acrylic pieces that went behind it, and then backlit it with LEDs. So now you have these really dope intricate arms with billet aluminum that now lit up on the backside of them. And it kind of, the truck got debuted at LST 2019. And everybody was like, holy shit, like, what is this brand? Where'd this come from? And then it's like, oh, that's Jason's or JFab, and they knew the name, didn't know the name, because on the face side of it, Plan B was always a face side. So as time went on, it was getting more traction, but Jason just needed more assistance on being able to do it, because it just takes a lot of manpower.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And JFab business itself is not just strictly truck stuff. We do a lot of truck parts and stuff like that, but outside of that, we have a lot of industrial business around us. We're in the Orlando area, so Disney, Universal's there.
Right.
Lockheed Martin is there. So we do a lot of like production, sheet metal production work for companies aside just truck stuff. So, he focuses mainly on that.
So realistically, that side is a machine shop for the most part. Okay.
Yeah, we have a Mitsubishi laser, Trump press brake, Haas CNC machines, welders, like all that stuff. Like that whole shop is set up for like, you come in, and if you're a business, whether it's aerospace, just whatever it may be, and say, hey, I need to make these parts.
Right.
Can you handle it full production? We pretty much can do it. There's companies that we do stuff for that they make really intricate control boxes for like stadiums, Universal, Disney. They handle all the electronics. They own the patent and all the brains that go inside of the box. We manufacture the box. We order in the material, we cut it, we form it, we build it, we put the little nut certs inside of it so then they can screw them together. We send them off, we have them powder coated, we screen print over it so you got play, forward, reverse, like all that stuff. So when you get it done, it's a whole completed shell box that now all they do is they just put their electronics in it, and now they sell this box to their customers.
So did it start more as a machine shop or start more with trucks? What was
more of a machine shop.
And then just a bunch of dudes that really like trucks?
Pretty much, man. Like Jason came from Ohio. He grew up in Ohio. His background was working in machine shops and stuff like that. He worked for a company up there. Their company opened a division in Florida, so that's what brought him and his brother to Florida. Was they were working for them. And then while he was there, he had kind of like got involved with like the mud truck guys. Okay. So like your old, mega truck guys, the racing guys, and he was building parts for them, like 2.5 ton the helmets that go on top of 2.5 ton axles, all the link arm mounts, things of that nature. And that's how he came to know Rob from Plan B. And at that time, Rob
was doing welding and fabrication, essentially.
Well, and Rob was like basically hustling parts, right? Like so, like guys in the mud truck industry would be like, "Hey, I need some helmets or I need tabs or whatever." And Rob's like, "Yeah, I can get that for you." So Rob would have Jason cut them, and then he would take them and then flip them to those guys. So he was like two-stepping it. At that time, Rob wasn't really doing a shop. He was actually, Rob's background is windows and doors and houses. He was doing a lot of high-end windows and doors and like big houses around Central Florida. So this was kind of like a side passion hustle type thing, right?
But it always seems to start from that, though.
Of course.
Yeah.
So then some guys were like, Rob would build his own truck, and he built a pretty dope truck back in 2010, and it got a lot of notoriety. And then, so he was building mud trucks, and then that escalated into somebody being like, well, hey, like, could you do this for my street truck? And then it progressed into that, and now it's, I would say in the last 10 to 13 years, a lot of it's had a really fast progression into what it is today.
Really?
Yeah.
So now that it's gone from the DIY, have to weld it together yourself kind of kit, to Elevate is obviously full bolt on, ready to install. What would be the advantage though of even having a DIY kit where the guy has to kind of weld it himself and is, it seems like it's a lot of potential for error. And
with a weld-on kit?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, extreme.
If someone's not really good.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and then you're especially
kind of
when
leaving
you're
it in the hands of
what could be.
I mean, there's amazing welders. Probably people that 100%. Could do a fantastic job. I'm not saying that, but not everyone is going to be able to do that. So, bolt-on seems like the safer way to go if you're going to scale it as a business. So I assume that's
safer. Your quality control is better. We have a better control over what the end result is. I'm just watching what my guys are doing as opposed to having to worry about what somebody in Texas or Oklahoma or wherever is at, and then on top of that, whenever you're talking about building trusses that go on axles, most of your axle housings are cast.
Right.
And you can weld steel to cast, but there's a very intricate process into do it and do it right.
Yeah.
And it takes a very specific type of welder to be able to do it. So, you eliminate all those variables, or you at least try to reduce the majority of them.
That's right.
So, for the most part, that was really and truly the whole mindset. And it now gives it to where the everyday shop that, is used to installing a BDS kit or a ProComp kit or whatever, they can now call us and order what looks to be a very intricate high-end kit, and they can actually install this the same way as they would a normal kit. They can put a book time to it. We provide you everything you need. Basically all they got to do once it shows up is powder coat it to their flavor of choice.
So you guys don't do any powder coating in advance? It's just,
nope.
It's raw?
Correct.
Just billet? Okay.
Everything we do, all our sheet metal parts, we send out raw. I do that specifically for...
Which makes sense because most of the guys putting this on are obviously going to want to do something specific. I mean, you see every build that's here,
and it's like you get guys that, let's say the truck was already built with, say, like a pretty standard kit, and they already have bumpers or grills or whatever, and they're running a shocker yellow or an illusion purple or something like that. And they say, hey, I want you to build a kit out and powder coat it this color. My guy in Florida may do it at a different temperature, or
That's
even
right.
just humidity. You know, powder coat is just like paint. Humidity, moisture, all that stuff
The
affects.
prep in advance can affect,
100%.
the
Final
material.
outcome.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
last thing I want to do is spend a couple grand in powder coat to send you this lift,
Yeah.
and then you're like, well, that purple doesn't match my purple.
If you want to hear about the struggles of powder coating, we had a guest on yesterday, and they had he had helped basically build and put together sort of like a build manager scenario where he helped on this this truck build, and it had a lift kit and it was a ton of components, you know, and they wanted to do every component powder coated, so they did it all meticulously, and the colors, exactly what you're talking about, did not turn out whatsoever.
Oh, yeah.
So, and they had like 3 or 4 more days until SEMA, so they had to strip it all, and they were already days into doing it. So strip the whole thing, redo it all. Right
Yeah,
into the
bro.
ring.
It is not
That's
fun.
a nightmare. It's
It
actually
is
a nightmare. Yeah.
I have been there personally myself, where you thought you gave yourself enough time, and then all of a sudden a powder coater shows up with all your parts, and you're like, sweet, I got X amount of time left to do it, and then something is not what it's supposed to be.
Powder
and then
coat chips off can happen.
Yep, powder coat chips off, or especially like when you're talking about illusions, because there are multiple stages. So, you know, if it didn't get an even coverage all the way across, so once you bake it and finalize it, it may not all be where it needs to be. Yeah, so it's just, dude, there's so many variables.
That's a good move. So obviously there's a lot of lift kits out there, right? You know, it's a huge industry in and of itself. So what separates you guys? Why would I choose Elevate if I'm going to go?
So there's some things that we address as far as like geometry and stuff that others don't. You know, most of your standard, our specialty really and truly right now is Ford stuff. That's really and truly our bread and butter is Super Duties. We stick in the HD market. We do some kits that are straight axle conversions for Duramaxes. We do some like weld together kits for Dodges, but again, that's like very specific. Like those mostly go to Rob because we know he can do them.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the Ford then. So specifically the Ford, because there's obviously a lot of other guys that make Ford. So
with the Super Duty, you know, we kind of specialize with that and staying. Most of your kits do a large track bar drop bracket off the frame. We do what we call a track bar relocation kit.
Okay.
So we keep the drop about the same as factory, but we just relocate it back to where it kind of centers the bar over the axle now. So it keeps it more in line with its mounting point. And then we actually relocate it up off the lower part of the axle, and we do a full bolt-on front truss. And then you get a new DOM track bar with Heims. So what little bit of bushing and stuff would have been there from the factory that gives some give in there, which can cause a little bit of wander and things of that nature. And then by not putting such a big drop off the frame, you don't have to worry about having so much pressure on this bracket and it breaking and things of that nature.
So you're taking all the weak points where all the stress would normally be and putting it kind of back to where it should be.
Correct.
Realistically.
Yep. Neutralizing it basically.
Yeah, as much as you can anyway.
Yeah, so you reduce deflection in your steering and in your suspension whenever you're driving down the road. And just less wear and tear and stress on the vehicle itself overall. Once we get to certain heights, like our big kits, like our 16-inch kits, you have no choice. We have to, at that point, kind of do a track bar drop bracket.
Right.
So like our front truss that we designed it to be able to work from like our 6-inch kit all the way to our 21-inch kit.
Okay.
So the only thing we changed at that point is just the frame mount. We make adjustment based upon there. And then for your steering, in order to keep all that stuff parallel, once you get up over 12 inches or bigger, we make you kind of go to what's called a high steer arm.
Right.
So that removes your drag link and moves it up higher, put it at a better, flatter angle as well.
And you supply that? That's supplied with the kits? Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah,
so it's really what you need.
That's ideally, right, man? So like our entry level price, people look at and they get a little bit of sticker shock, which I get, but you're not having to source anything. Like whenever you call me,
well, that's
for a
it.
kit,
Like a lift kit is great, but if you have to fix all these issues on your own,
correct,
it's not going to be cheaper.
Right.
You know, that's
and that's what usually the phone call that I usually get is, hey man, I went this route, but then I end up having to order this drive shaft.
Your customers are going to be all the guys doing it for the second time.
100%.
It's going to be a lot of guys that did it once and we're like, I'm not doing that again.
That's usually what happens. I get a lot of, hey, I went this route because the entry level price was cheaper. But then by the time I ordered all the things that I ended up needing, it ended up costing me way more than had I just ordered it from you in the first place.
I'll say in the automotive world, especially the aftermarket, you really get what you pay for.
100%.
Very much
100%.
so. It can't be any truer than in this.
Well,
if something is really cheap and you're like, that's a great deal.
Yeah. It's my biggest thing has always been from the time I started doing this stuff when I was in high school, man. Like, this is my 20th year of doing this stuff.
Right.
So from very young in the industry, I watched a lot of people take things and do them on a budget. And what people I think sometimes forget is this is a vehicle that you, not only yourself is in, but your family's in. And whenever you're running your family up and down the road in something, why are you going to put a budgeted price point on you and your family's life? And then you think about, and aside from that, something happens and you cross a lane and go into another lane of somebody else. Now you're putting somebody else's family in life. It
is a higher, when you're talking, especially on a smaller lift, someone that might just have that they're going to daily drive it.
Right.
They're going to drive it all the time. We're not talking show trucks, but the more reasonable, let's say, but all the things you're talking about, relocating and having those stress points and really removing the risks of what could happen. It is true, but people don't always think about that.
No, man, when I worked retail and on the counter, it was always so funny to me. Guys would come in, they're like, hey, I got this new truck or I got this new Jeep or whatever. I ain't going rock crawling. I ain't desert running it. So I don't need nothing crazy. I just need something like this cheap, this or whatever. And I'm like, bro, like, what's more important? Being able to do 70 mile an hour down the interstate safely and comfortably, or being able to creep 5 mile an hour down a trail whenever you're going to hunting camp? I'm like, if the shit breaks at 5 mile an hour, who cares?
That's the thing. It actually matters a lot less in those circumstances. Exactly. It's the driving. If you hit a pothole or a bump or something stupid on the road, you never know. Right.
Like shit, exactly. Who knows?
Things happen, and that's when it really matters. Yeah.
So that's why it always, and it's like, thankfully, you explain it to people that way, and then they go, shit, you're right. I never thought about it like that. And they're like, all right, cool. Well, what do I need to do? And again, it's just knowing your customer. We always called it qualifying the customer, right?
Yeah.
It's really and truly just taking the time, getting to know the customer, understanding what their expectations are, what their uses for the vehicle is, what their life of ownership of the vehicle is, and really and truly educating them on what fits right. And then in order to be able to do that, though, I mean, you as a salesman, you need to know the products. You need to know how they work. You need to know how they function. And that's why I always preached to my guys for a long time, like, you need to also be an enthusiast. Like, yes. You need to turn wrenches on the weekend or go out in the shop, and whenever the shop guys are putting stuff on, don't just go out there and hassle them about why is it that it's taking them so long and you've never done the stuff yourself. Go find out for yourself. That's actually a great point.
I think that's very good perspective for all people that are... So I'm in sales also, right? So, like, I know... But I'm also part of the builds. I've built my own cars. I've done it.
Right.
So I know and understand, and that is an important thing. It'd be, truthfully, if someone was coming into this industry and had never done a build or been a part or seen it in any car, truck, whatever it is, you really need to, that's like your homework. You 100%. Absolutely need to do that to have any understanding of like what it actually is.
Well, I mean, that's like when I started doing this right out of high school, like the shop I started at, that was what I did. I started in the back turning wrenches. And I even got the job just because the owner overheard me talking to a customer in his shop one day about like what lift, wheels, and tires would work well on his truck at the time. And he's like, how do you know that? And I was like, just researching it and caring, right? Like, it was my passion. That's what I always cared about. So I just always researched like what was quality brands and what was good and what fit well. And he's like, well, hey, you want a job? And I was like, sure. So like I started out and I started in the back turning wrenches. So then when I moved from turning wrenches to working on the sales counter, and people would look at me, I was young, like I was 20 years old. And they're like, well, what do you know? And I'm like, well, I used to put the stuff on. That's what I know. Like, I've literally built trucks from ground up, test drove them, aligned them, run them down the road, and made sure these are the products that in the time I've been doing this that I know for a fact are going to give you a positive result. And it would totally change people's aspects on like, hey, you're not just somebody trying to push a narrative, right? You're not telling me to buy this because a rep came in beforehand, said, hey, I'll give you a kickback on it. It's because you genuinely know from hands-on experience, this is what is going to do well.
Which I think is actually glad you're doing this, and anyone that, Elevate fans that are watching this, or even potentially, obviously, people that may not have a lift, they're looking, they don't know where to start or whatever. I think it's nice to hear that. It gives real validity to the brand, right? Because you've been there, you've done it, right? So when you're putting these kits together, it's the way it should be.
Well, and that's what, even from the install aspect of it, right? Like I pretty much, all of us at the shop, like, because we are a small crew, right? So we do wear multiple hats. Our engineer has to do more things than just sit at a computer all day.
Yeah.
Jason, he does more things.
It's the
than
struggles
just
of a small business, man.
100%, dude. 100%, right? So I do a lot of the R&D for everything,
right,
along with sales and marketing and everything else, right? But with that, it's like whenever we're designing stuff and I go to fit it up, if it's taking longer than what I feel like it should, or it's being more of a hassle than what I feel like it should be, don't get me wrong, there's some things that do take two hands.
Sure.
But I feel like if it takes more than just one person being able to put stuff on themselves, then we need to figure out a better way to do it and make sure that we can
because
cut down
most
our
of the
install.
time it is only one person.
Right.
Half the time it's dudes at night.
Yeah.
Like when they get, the kids go to bed and they get like an hour, it's just
right?
them. There's no one else there. So
yeah,
that is,
or like whenever you're at a shop, right? Like you got a shop that's there for production. They're trying to turn trucks out, a standard 6-inch kit books for 8 hours of install time, right? And now all of a sudden this kit's taking 14 or 18 hours.
You got two guys on it.
When you got two guys on it, it's like, well, they just lost a lot of money.
The issue becomes, it's not that the kit isn't good. It's just that people won't want to sell or install because the install starts
100%. Because that's what I tell guys all the time. I'm like, look, you have to remember, one of your biggest dictators in a shop of who sells your products is the installers. So I'm gonna tell you right now, it don't matter what product it is. If it's a pain to install, I'm gonna tell you right now, the guys in the back are gonna walk up to the front counter and they're gonna look at the salesman and say, "Do not ever sell that crap again."
And that is what happens.
It is not. I just lost my ass on labor of installing it because it said it could be done in 4 hours and it just took me all day.
Oh yeah.
So they got paid a half a day's wage, right? So they're gonna tell you, "Don't ever sell it again." And then nobody's gonna take the time to, majority of the time. Most shops are going to take time to call the manufacturer and then vet out.
For them, it's dead. That's it. That's too much problem.
Yep.
There's obviously this industry is also very competitive. There are a lot of manufacturers.
100%.
So the second that you kind of get that one, it starts getting a little tricky.
100%.
But well, I'm really glad to hear all that. That's very important actually for people to know. There's probably people that don't know some of that. So what do you think is going to happen, and what do you foresee happening in a year from now? Let's say SEMA next year. What will we see from Elevate?
I mean, honestly, man, our hope for this is to be able to continue growing at a healthy pace. Like we've had a lot of good success this past year. A lot of good feedback from SEMA this week has been really nice. Getting some new customers that honestly I would have really never thought, because it's just a different, they work in a different segment of the industry than we do.
Right.
But we have some niche products that other people haven't figured out yet that I think is what's drawn attention to the brand. But for that, I just hope that we can continue to do it. Next year, we'll have another good group of trucks. Like we have overall, I think there was 12 trucks this year with our products on it. As far as full kits, there's some other trucks like we do frame overlays for Super Duties that have any level kits,
right,
and they have to be a little specific because of the hydraulic arms and everything that are there. So there's some trucks around here with any level kits that have our frame overlay kits, our fuel cells. We do a lot of aftermarket fuel cells.
So do you see expanding the product offering more than just lift? And
we have, like, we do bumpers, we do replacement fuel cells for most of the big heavy duty trucks, GM, Dodge, frame overlays, bumpers. So yeah, it's to continue the expansion and just continue to refine it. Like that's really and truly, like every week, bro, like we're going through, and even though we think we have it all set, like there may be something that we're like, oh, we could have done this better. So let's just go back and do this better. So really,
you'll have like revised versions, like a version 1, 2, 3, kind of that, just things.
Yep.
Essentially,
and we try to do it as quick as possible, so we don't have a lot of stuff that maybe if, say, 5 years from now, somebody's like, hey, I need to get a replacement one of these, or I want to upgrade my regular steel overlay to a mirrored overlay or a double overlay. I don't have to try and figure out what they had and go back through. So we try to do the revisions as fast as possible so we can try and keep everything
So the
uniform.
product is essentially what the product should be.
100%.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
But the biggest goal is just continue to keep our inventory strong. Like, I feel like it's one of the advantages we have is, like, we try to keep all of our brake lines, our drive shafts, our shocks, because shocks for a lift company can really be a dampener on time. And hopefully we can continue to get our lead times down. Like right now we're building at like a 6 to 8 week build time. But I'd like to have it to where every time I do a production run and I put a bunch of kits on the shelf, like by the time we get them all boxed up and done, they sell out. So it's like I'm having a hard time keeping up with demand. So that's really and truly what I'd like to do. Is
It's a good
I'd like
problem
to get
to have.
It is a good problem.
There are solutions for that at least.
So
good.
that's really and truly a lot of the big goal is really and truly get our production in a little bit better of a
That's a good
place.
goal for that's a good goal for next year then.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thanks, man.
Yeah,
Thanks
man,
for coming
it.
by. We're gonna go check. I'm gonna go actually go check out some of the trucks with Elevate. I gotta go
For
track
sure.
them down. Yeah. Thanks everyone. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.